So Cold in July, which is the new film by Jim Mickle and screenwriter Nick D'Amici, who did the remake of We Are What We Are before that, did Stakeland, did Mulberry before that. And so essentially it's based on a novel from 1989 by Joe R. Lansdale. Story is there is a guy in an East Texan town. He's in his house with his wife and his child. He is an intruder. He goes to the cupboard and gets his daddy's gun, which he clearly hasn't handled regularly. And in a tense moment, something terrible happens and there is death. The next thing is he's terribly embarrassed about what's happened, but the rest of the town are like, hey, fine. And suddenly you've become a man. And then he starts to wonder about what he's actually done. Here's a clip.
What's this? It says Freddie Russell. So that's not the guy I shot. Is that some kind of mistake or what?
This Freddie Russell is just a bad mugshot, not very recent. People change, Rich.
Well, not that much.
You were pretty upset that night, remember?
Yeah, he died right in front of me. I look at pictures of faces all day. That is not the guy.
It's called shock. Okay? Memory gets a little fuzzy. It happens. Now, why don't you go home and let me deal with the police work, huh?
So, Michael C. Hall in the central role, who many people know from Dexter. And what happens is at the beginning of the movie, it starts out as a kind of, neo-noir Southern Gothic story, and it's very tense and very edgy. Then the film starts to change direction, and it becomes an exercise in flipping its genres. One thing that happens is that Don Johnson turns up in a great big fire apple red convertible with a white Stetson, and then it sort of becomes a kind of Don Johnson movie. Then Sam Shepard turns up in a sort of grizzled ex-con looking for vengeance, but actually unearthing much more than he thought, and it starts to mutate into something like an old slasher movie. It's set in 1989. The novel was published in 1989, so mobile phones consist of Don Johnson standing outside, holding his hand up with a briefcase doing this, and the whole film is played out to this sort of electro accompaniment, very squidgy analog electro sound that kind of reminds you of the John Carpenter music from Halloween or the Giorgio Moroder music from Midnight Express. So it's very specifically set in a retro past. VHS videos feature strongly in it, and all the way through it does this thing about it's this kind of genre, it's that kind of genre. Now the interesting thing about the team of Jim Mickle and Nick D'Amici as director and writer is that they're very genre literate. When they were doing the remake of the Mexican cannibal movie We Are, they sort of inverted the story of the original and made it, rather than patriarchal, they made it matrilineal. They made it actually about the female
I've never
line.
heard that word before.
What, matrilineal?
Matrilineal.
The motherly line.
Yeah, no, yeah. I worked it out. I just never heard it used.
No, okay, but they do. I mean, they've talked about this, and this isn't some sort of Ponzi film critic affectation. They genuinely do that. They say, well, okay, rather than let's looking at it as a patrilineal thing, let's look at it as a matrilineal thing. In this case, they sort of flip it almost entirely and go, okay, well, this is a movie about men. It is absolutely a movie about male stereotypes. So you've got on the one hand the Don Johnson stereotype, on the other hand the Sam Shepard stereotype, and then in the middle of it you've got this character, so played very well by Michael C. Hall, who is essentially at the beginning of the movie, emasculated and isn't somebody who's handled a gun and is laughed at by everybody around him. And then during the course of the film, he suddenly becomes mentored by these kind of archetypal dinosaur-like caricatures of masculinity. Meanwhile, the film itself keeps going, okay, now we're a Southern Gothic thriller, well, now we're a horror movie, now we're actually a buddy movie. And some people might find that annoying or troublesome. Actually, all those shifts are in the Joe R. Lansdale original. I mean, he's a writer who's, sometimes his prose goes into absurdity. He was the guy who was responsible for Bubba Hotep, the story of Elvis and JFK getting together to fight ancient Egyptian curses. And occasionally the flipping from genre to genre to genre sort of undermines the tension. But for a good part of it, it's very well played. As I said, each individual actor occasionally appears to be in a completely separate movie to everybody else. I like the soundtrack very much, and I like the fact that it keeps you on your toes and keeps you guessing and never allows you to relax into exactly what kind of movie it is. There are negatives to that, as I said. Sometimes the sustained tension gets lost as the film suddenly... It's almost like flipping channels whilst listening to your favourite soundtrack albums on vinyl. There is an element of that. But what I like most about it is that as filmmakers, they understand, appreciate, and like genre. They never appear to be tourists in genre. It seems to be somewhere that they live, and I appreciate that.